thank you for all joining me. I'm going to try to give you some information on the North Channel, not just the popular anchorages, but also potentially some out of the way or off the beaten path anchorages that you might find enjoyable if you're heading up to the North Channel next summer. I'm expecting the North Channel to be extremely crowded after 2 years of having U.S. boats not being allowed across the border. Some slight background information. Our boat was in Ontario, and I carried dual citizenship. So for the last 2 years, we were the only U.S. boat that was cruising in the North Channel amidst all of the Canadians. So I feel very, very privileged that we got to enjoy the pristine waters of the North Channel when the crowds were down by 60%. Any trip, any cruise that you take starts with a little bit of advanced planning. The first question many of you might have is, how much time should I spend? And the North Channel is one of those wide open questions. You can spend 2 weeks cruising the North Channel, or you can spend 3 months, or you can spend multiple years cruising the North Channel, and you still will not see everything that there is to see. It's another question that we've been asked before is whether you need to bring a dinghy. And the answer to that is yes. You need to have some method of getting off your big boat and getting off to go visit other boats or exploring all the wonderful little nooks and crannies around the North Channel. And it doesn't matter whether it's a dinghy, whether it's a small rowboat, whether it's a couple of kayaks. You just need some method that you can get around and really explore what there is to see within the North Channel. You all have electronic charts, probably. It doesn't matter whether you're using an iPad with Navionics, using Raymarine, Garmin. The only thing I would say is make sure all of your charts are up to date before you leave for the remote areas of the North Channel. Internet is very sparse, so you want to make sure that you've got those up to date before you go. You also want to have paper charts for backup. Paper charts are also really good for if you're discussing an area with somebody, being able to open them up and make some pencil marks and whatnot. We use the Richardson's chart book for Lake Huron. That is one good source of or a concise pile of charts for the entire area. Another source of information is the Great Lakes Cruising Club. Before I go any further, how many people here are already members of the Great Lakes Cruising Club? Okay. How many of you have been to the North Channel before? Oh, 2. Okay, excellent. All right. The Great Lakes Cruising Club is one of its primary purposes is to provide harbor reports of places that you can cruise to throughout all of the Great Lakes. There's over 1,100 harbor reports that cover the 5 Great Lakes and connecting waterways. There are over 140 just for the North Channel alone. I'm not covering all of those today. We'd be here till sometime tomorrow. If you're here and you're interested in joining the GLCC, there is a discount for the show that the normal initiation fee of $90 is now $75. And then the annual fee is the same at $135 a year. The harbor reports are available they're available online. You can look at them with any type of mobile device, but you can also download them to your iPad or to your computer or whatever you want, so you have them available to you when you're out of connectivity areas. Once you're in the North Channel, great source of information is the Little Current Cruisers Net. It is run by Roy Eaton, who lives in Little Current. It starts up usually, I believe, after the first, essentially after July 1st, which is the Canadian long weekend holiday, and it runs through the end of August. It's every morning on Channel 71, and at 9 o'clock in the morning, he'll give you a little bit of news. He'll give you the weather. He'll repeat the weather if he's asked. He'll repeat it again at the end of the broadcast. And then he goes on into check-ins from where the boats, various boats are located. A lot of people don't bother with checking in. We do. It lets our friends know where we are currently or where we are heading for the day. If we're trying to rendezvous. It also serves a great purpose in that you can use the harbor reports, or excuse me, you can use the net to listen for how many boats are either in a particular anchorage or going to a particular anchorage. And that's how I use it. If I hear that 10 boats are in Turnbull and 5 more boats are heading that way, I'm going to go someplace else. The weather in the area, you're Great Lakes sailors. You know about weather. You know it's fickle. It changes its mind constantly. And if there's any tip you take away from today, whatever they say is at the top end of the wind prediction for the day, add 5. So if they say it's going to be 10 to 15, it's going to hit 20. And I can almost guarantee that it is. The islands and the shoreline do very strange winds, things to the wind up there, and they're always higher than what the predictions are. So if you want to have a comfortable sail, plan on 5 knots higher than the predicted. And that includes if you're looking at windy or any other source. Anchoring in the North Channel. I don't know how many of you have spent a lot of time out at anchor. I spend probably 60% of our time in the summer at anchor. Actually, it's probably more like 70. And there's some things that you learn over time as to what works and what doesn't work. And one of the things in the North Channel is that you're going into small little gunk hole areas. And frequently there's a lot of other boats that are going to be trying to get into those same areas. So you want to make sure that you're looking out for where you position your boat. You want to make sure that if you position your boat, if a storm is coming in, you can pretty much guarantee that there's going to be a wind shift by at least 90 degrees in either direction. So you want to make sure that your swinging room, that you're not going to swing into another boat, or even worse yet, swing into a boulder. So you want to make sure that you're looking that you've got adequate room. If you want to get away from the risk of swinging, then you do a little bit of, you do what's called a med moor. You drop your anchor off the bow, you take your dinghy, and you take a 200-foot floating line to the shore, and you snug your stern up to the shore as close as possible. It's a very intimate way of seeing the North Channel. You can get right up to the boulders. It's our favorite way of anchoring in the North Channel, but a lot of people with larger boats don't do it. We learned how to do it on a 22-foot sailboat, and we still do it on a 41 sailboat. And it's still our favorite way of anchoring in the North Channel. If you are going to free swing in an anchorage, make note of which boats around you have chain coming off their bow roller or which boats have rode coming off their bow roller. Any boat that is rode or rope, depending on what you want to call it, is going to swing or respond to the changes in the wind direction much faster than a boat that's on all chain. So that's another little tip that we've seen if you want to keep yourself protected. Some of the areas are also difficult to get a good hook into. So you want to make sure you're backing down adequately on your anchor to make sure that where you set your anchor, that you're going to stay put. I'm not going to talk about any of the towns in North Channel. There's a bazillion sources for that information. What I am going to share with you is the highlighted areas in this slide. All of them have groceries, LCBO, diesel, gas, pump out, fresh water, laundry, and showers. So these are the primary locations within the North Channel that you would want to get that, if you need to reprovision. One thing that we have done over the past 5-6 years, before we have started the cruising season, we have taken on a supply of freeze-dried foods. We purchase freeze-dried corn, peas, leeks, onions, tomato flakes, raspberries, mangoes, all sorts of things that they're very light. They don't add any weight to your boat. They don't add any can weight to your boat, which can be heavy and then create garbage issues for you as you're underway. And they last really well and they taste fabulous. Our current source that we've been using for the last couple of years is the North Bay Trading Company out of Wisconsin. It is a mail order operation, and I can tell you their sweet corn is amazing. And I just want to point out, as you look at the chart, it's 100 nautical miles from one end of the North Channel to the other. So there's some pretty good distances in there. And there's a pretty good fetch that comes along that from one end to the other if the winds start picking up. The first area that I'm going to talk about is in the far west. And it's probably the area that you're going to enter into when you head up to the North Channel. It's where you're going to clear in through Canadian customs. The one thing that you may not be aware of, if this is the first time you've been to the North Channel, is that as soon as you cross into Canadian waters, you're going to want to switch your VHF from USA to either Canada or to international. And then all marinas respond to channel 68. They will not respond to you on channel 16. 16 is only used by the Coast Guard in Canada and by boats hailing other boats. And I would note that if you're hailing a marina on 68 or you're hailing another boat on channel 16, please use low power. The first area that you may come into, if you're heading into the North Channel, it's very easy access from, say, Rogers City or the Drummond Island area, is Meldrum Bay. It is a CBSA reporting center. They have a phone inside the marina office that you can use to call in. It's got very good protection behind the break wall. You can also anchor out in the bay if you don't want to go into the dock. They do have gas, diesel, fresh water, laundry, and showers. But they do not have any provisioning. There is no store in Meldrum Bay. The best thing about Meldrum Bay is the restaurant. The Meldrum Bay Inn is fabulous. I don't think we've ever gone to the North Channel without making a trip to Meldrum Bay, regardless of how far it is out of our way. I will tell you, they are no longer serving lunch. They are dinner only. They also reduced their hours over the last couple of years because of COVID, and they actually decided they really like the slower pace. So they are not doing as many seatings as they had in years past. And even through COVID in the last 2 years, you had to make your reservations 2 weeks in advance if you wanted to go there. So 2 weeks, and you will not be disappointed. The next bay over from Meldrum Bay is Vidal Bay. It's a little known anchorage. It's about 7 nautical miles east of Meldrum Bay. It's protected from all winds. You can duck in if the winds are coming from the north. You can duck in on right on the south side of Vidal Bay. But the primary anchorage is down in the bottom area. Our preferred anchorage is a little bit to the left of where that anchor mark is on the chart. And it's a lovely place. It's again, you can enter it from either side of Vidal Island. There's no hazards. It's very straightforward, and it's a beautiful location. In the last couple of years, the Great Lakes Foundation, which is affiliated with the Great Lakes Cruising Club, gave a couple of grants to the Nature Conservancy, and they purchased up all the remaining land in Vidal Bay, ensuring that it will never be developed. So I was quite happy to be on the board of the GLCC at that time with the GLF, and that was one I immediately said yes to, along with everybody else. Moving further to the east along Manitoulin Island is an area called Bayfield Sound. It's huge. We went into it for the first time last year. We just barely skimmed the surface of it. And one of the closer anchorages to the entry of Bayfield Sound is Cook's Bay. We were actually anchored around the corner under the shadow of Battery Bluff. It kept us completely protected from all of the west winds. And there was a large sand spit that came out right behind us. And we spent our afternoons watching 5 or 6 sandhill cranes bounce around on the sandhill spit. It was absolutely beautiful. You could literally spend a couple of weeks getting lost in Bayfield Sound. And it's both Vidal and Bayfield Sound are areas that are rarely cruised by other boaters. So if the popular places are packed, then you might want to look at some of these off the beaten path locations. The next area is Turnbull, and this is one of the premier locations. It's one of our favorite anchorages. It's got the advantage in that it's only 10 nautical miles away from Blind River. So if you go into Blind River to either clear customs or to provision, it's the closest good anchorage to that spot. There's room for lots of boats in this anchorage. It's got a very nice beach area for picnics and bonfires. And here's an aerial view of Turnbull. And as you look at the primary side is the north anchorage, but you can also go into the south side. Last year, we were able to take our boat between the north and the south anchorage. The depth reading that I was seeing was about 6 feet. We draw 5.5. The water level is continuing to drop in the North Channel. So if I was heading to the North Channel this year, I don't know that I would take my boat through that, but we're able to both every year for the last 3 years, we could take our boats through. The anchorage can handle 20, 30 boats. It's huge. It's also extremely beautiful. And up in the upper corner, there is a sand beach that you can just barely see in the photograph. This is a picture that a woman took of the 2019 Great Lakes Cruising Club Wilderness Rally. I was one of the organizers of the event, and on the main day, we had a huge storm come through. It hit around noon. It lasted till about 8 at night. It was blowing 25 to 35 knots the entire time with rain that was going sideways most of the time. We had 25 boats in the anchorage. And of the 25, only one boat had to reposition. And that was not because they dragged. It was because they were getting an uncomfortable wave action because they had of where they had originally anchored. So we were really happy that everybody stayed safe. It was exciting, to say the least. Turnbull faces west. So one of the beautiful things about Turnbull is that you get these fabulous sunsets. And this is why it's one of our favorite places. Moving on to the middle area, the Middle West, there's a couple of places I'm going to mention, but due to time, I had to do a little editing. And there are a couple of places. Armour Island is actually right on the backside of Eagle Island. It's a lovely little anchorage. It can only hold about 4 to 5 boats. So keep that in mind. But if you want a more intimate anchorage, I would recommend Armour Island. John Harbor is a large island. It is very close to Bear Drop, which is one of the popular islands. If Bear Drop looks too crowded, I would recommend heading over to John. It's a beautiful area. There's a little sub-harbor of John Harbor called Cleary Cove. Unless you're in a very shallow draft boat, less than 4 feet, I would not go into Cleary Cove. We went in there last year at 5.5 feet. We ran aground. We got off, got anchored, had a lovely time. Another sailboat came in, anchored after us, or actually, should say they came in after us. They ran aground exactly where we did, but they had a bulb keel and they could not get off without a tow, and they were blocking the entrance, so we couldn't leave until they left. So unless you've got a draft of 4 feet or less, I would not go into Clary Cove. Clapperton Harbor on Clapperton Island is another place. It's not as scenic as many of the others. However, it's a convenient stopping point between Little Current and Gore Bay. Or if you're in Gore Bay and you want to head up to the Benjamins, it's a convenient stopping place. It's got a big anchorage. It's very well protected. It's just not as pretty as other places. The center island has an old resort that's falling apart, which is some people think is interesting, and some of us think it's just an eyesore. The island itself is First Nation land. I shouldn't say Harbor Island, which is the one in the middle. Clapperton Island itself is First Nation land, and you cannot go ashore without permission. Bear Drop, as I mentioned, is one of the popular islands. It's absolutely beautiful. There's 2 places. Sorry about that. There's 2 places that you can anchor in Bear Drop. One, and what most people consider the preferred anchorage, is up in the notch, way forward up in the notch. We tried anchoring in that area last year, and what we discovered that is as you get to the northern side, the northwest side of that notch, there is a huge shoal that comes out, and it's covered by about 6 or 7 inches of sand. So while it looks like a great place to anchor, you will not get your anchor to set for anything. So I would recommend finding a different spot. We actually like anchoring further back. What the knot or the cut through is actually called the Bear Fall, and we prefer anchoring back by the Bear Fall. Most of the boats are ahead of us, and we're usually the only one back there, and it's far more private, and it's just a lovely place further back. This is a picture from the bow of our boat looking forward towards the other boats that are all up in the notch. We are actually quite a ways back from them. And there were actually more boats before this picture was taken, but some of them had left by that point. If you take your dinghy or your kayaks through the Bear Fall Cut and end up on the other side, there's some fabulous places to explore. With your kayaks or your dinghies. There also happens to be very, very good fishing out there. Some people have hauled in some pretty good sized fish that they've then shared with some of us in the anchorage. So definitely would recommend Bear Drop. It is one of those areas that if there's extremely strong west winds or a storm coming in, you want to make sure you've got a really good set on your hook. We've unfortunately had boats drag down on us in Bear Drop. I think mostly because they anchored on top of that shoal and didn't test the set on their anchor well enough. So if you do that, you'll be good. Eagle Island is another very popular island, but it's also very large. It's completely protected by all of the winds from the east, from the north, west, southwest. It is exposed to the east. But it's a lovely anchorage. It's very popular, but not so much so that you couldn't go in there and be comfortable finding a place to drop an anchor. Armour Island is one that I mentioned before. That's right off the northeast or northwest tip of Eagle Island, and it's in that little slot between that you would anchor if you're so lucky to get there and find out that there's only a couple of boats. And as I mentioned, that Eagle Island has a great view to the east. So if you're a morning person and you appreciate beautiful sunrises, then this is what you might catch. The next area is north of Little Current. And there's some, again, I've for time constraints, I'm mentioning a couple, but I'm not actually going to go into a great amount of detail. Amadras Island is, it's a lovely anchorage. It's not used heavily. It's big. It can hold a lot of boats. It's exposed to the north and the west or the east, but not any other. It's good from the west or the south. It's kind of halfway between Little Current and the area, the popular areas like the Benjamins. So if you don't want to head all the way to the Benjamins or to the Benjamin area in one day, Amadras is a lovely place to stop for a day or two. Sturgeon Cove is another one that's close by. It's a very well protected anchorage. However, it has an extreme zigzag between the shoals on the entrance, and I would not go into Sturgeon Cove unless you're following somebody who's been there before, or you have more detailed information like what is in the Great Lakes Cruising Club harbor reports to figure out that entrance. Hawthorn Island is a very popular location, but it's also very, very large. And I don't know if you're going to be able to, there's two entrances. I'm probably going to goof this up, but there's two entrances into the Hawthorn area. One is the west side and one is on the east. The west side is the preferred entrance. The only hazard, and on the east side, it's, let's just say I would not recommend the eastern entrance unless you're following a boat that's been there before and has a charted path in. This is one of those places where I would say the charts are incorrect as to the location of the rocks. We've gone through it. I think I went through it probably doing about 2 knots with the bow watch the first time. Once you make it through any place once and you've got a path you can follow, then you can do it again. But the first time is always a little crazy. On the western end, where the square is, there is a series of shoals. And as long as you stay close to the little tiny island, you'll clear those shoals without any problem whatsoever. On the far west side is an area that's referred to as Oak Bay. It's large. It can handle a number of boats. We've never stopped there because there's some other places we like the look of better. But that is an area that you can anchor to get away from some of the crowds. Towards the north side, behind the little island, is another anchorage that's called Portage Bay. It's big enough for 1, maybe 2 boats if they're rafted together. It's a lovely, lovely little place. Its only downside is that there's a cottage on the shore right next to it. And if the people who own the cottage are there, they are known to play very loud music, very late at night, pretty much ruining the anchorage for anybody. But if they're not there, grab that spot. It's lovely. Down on the lower end of Hawthorn Island on the west is a cove called Venetia Cove. I've never seen more than 2 boats in there. And usually I only see 1. So that's another place that if you want to hide away from all the other boats, you might want to consider. And then on the far right-hand side is Leroy Cove. And that, I've taken my kayak back in there, but I haven't actually taken the big boat back there. But I did go back there last year or the summer before, and it's rocks, so you don't see until you get in there. And I popped through the other side and was pleasantly surprised to see a couple of trawlers back in there. They had this whole beautiful area all to themselves, hiding from the rest of the world. It was quite nice. And then on the lower corner is another anchorage that is rarely used. At most, I've only ever seen 1 boat in that area. I think, people just don't know they can anchor there. Moving into the more popular ones, or the ones that I'm going to touch, we'll go to the next slide. The West Anchorage, also known as Retirement Cove. I don't know why it's called that. This is the one that was right in the middle. There are 3 large shoal areas that you have to go around to get in there. So you actually go to the north of those, go all the way around, and then duck back in. It's very large. You can see that there's a lot of boats in there, but they all have a huge amount of distance between each of them. The next anchorage is called the South Anchorage. It's some of us refer to it as Fraser Bay. It's a must-do kind of stop. It's a beautiful anchorage, but the best thing about the South Anchorage are the owners of the cottage. And oh, by the way, I usually try to tell people to stay away from cottages, but in this case, I'm saying go to this place because the cottage is owned by Norman Elaine. They're former cruisers. They're exceedingly friendly and welcoming to anybody that shares their harbor. There's room for at least 10 or more boats. And they have, if it's a nice day, Elaine will come out in her kayak and she may invite you to go on a little kayak tour with her. If you don't have a kayak, but you express interest that you would love to go, she may loan you one of her extra kayaks so you can still participate. If she does this, take her up on it. It's worth it. It's also, if it's a nice day, she might invite you to shore at 5 o'clock for a happy hour. And they have a large deck and they invite all the boats, not every day, but they will invite boats to join them on their deck. And Elaine takes great pride in remembering the boats that have been there before. So she will insist on taking your picture. She probably, without you knowing it, will take a picture of your boat so that she puts it in her book. So if you come back the following year, she remembers who you are. A little tip about going to other boats or going to somebody's place for happy hour. We have what we call boat rules. And that means you bring your own beverage, you bring some food or a snack to share, and you leave when your beverage is either empty or Mother Nature calls, whichever comes first. So that's boat rules in the North Channel. We pretty much use it everywhere. The next area is the Benjamins. And if you've ever seen a picture of the North Channel, you've probably seen a picture of the Benjamins. It's extremely popular. I'm going to actually talk about not just the Benjamins, but the island to the north, Fox Island, and Croaker Island as well. The Benjamins there's 2 main anchorages. One is between North and South Benjamin, and the other one is the big notch on South Benjamin. The one that people are most familiar with from photos and whatnot is the main one. But I can tell you the holding is terrible. There's always about 20 or 30 boats there, and I'm always amazed that anybody stays overnight there because the holding is horrible. What we do is we anchor in Croaker, and then we take our dinghy across to do day exploration of the Benjamin Island area. The approach to the Benjamins is from the south, not the north. You go through an area called the Sow and the Pigs. It's actually very easy to navigate through. If you're going up into that main anchorage, I would say the anchorage is fine if you want to do a day stop there. But if there's any kind of weather coming, I would not want to stay there overnight. This is the view from the top of the big granite rocks, looking down into that main bay. This particular day, probably triple the number of boats that are in there, and you'll get what a more realistic picture is of the Benjamins on a midsummer day. South Benjamin is that notch that comes up from the south side, The holding is much better. You can still do the same type of hiking that you do from the main side. The other thing that I like about the South Benjamin anchorage is there's a huge number of little gunk holes and little shoals that you can take your dinghy or your kayaks through and explore all along that south shore of South Benjamin. And you will be amazed to find boats tucked into these weird little spots that you cannot figure how the heck they got that 25-foot boat in there. But they do, and I've always been shocked how they've done it. I swear to God, they must get out and push the boats through. Croaker Island is the island that I mentioned straight across. It's a beautiful island. It has two main anchorage areas. The northern one is a little more exposed to the western wind. However, it has the advantage of having a very nice sand beach along a significant portion of it. We actually prefer the smaller bay that's to the south. It's a tiny area, but it's more protected from the winds. The best way to go in there, you can drop anchor in the middle, but it's a deep anchorage. If you really, this is one of those areas where I'd highly recommend that you tie to shore, that you drop anchor and then take a stern line to shore so you can tuck back in closer. Then you don't have to worry about swinging into anybody else or somebody coming in later in the day and getting so close to you that you're not comfortable. Fox Island was the island north of the Benjamins. It's another absolutely beautiful place. The downside with Fox is the entrance is a little bit tricky. You have to come through, avoid some shoals, and then take a hard turn to the left or to the port. It's another one that I would say have a bow watch and go slow. But once you're in there, it's a beautiful anchorage. The downside is you cannot see how many boats are in the anchorage until you actually get in there. You get to a certain point, you can start to see masts sticking up, but that's not going to show you all the trawlers or any of the power boats that might be back there. It's protected from all winds. It's another area that I would recommend dropping an anchor and tying to shore. It'll get you, you'll have a far more enjoyable time and not have to worry about other boats swinging into you if you're snugged up against the shoreline. Right at the top of the harbor on Fox Island, it looks like it's land, but there's actually a waterway that cuts through there, and you can take your kayaks through there, and then you get to the north side and you can explore the little nooks and crannies on the north side. There's also a huge amount of exploration that can be done on the south side of the island. So it's another area that having a dinghy or a kayak is well worth it. That's our boat, the green one. And the boat next to us is the rear commodore for the Great Lakes Cruising Club for the North Channel and all of the Canadian side of Lake Huron. He's on a boat called Good Idea. Many of the pictures in this presentation are his. And he loves to talk about cruising in the North Channel or cruising anywhere in Georgian Bay. So if you see that dark blue boat with the name Good Idea on the side, feel free to go over and introduce yourself, because he loves nothing better than to talk about boating in his favorite areas with other boaters. So, and then he might be watching now, I'm not sure, but he's probably nodding his head if he is. And in both cases, both those two boats have an anchor off front and we're both tied to shore. Okay, the next anchorage is Louisa. It's pretty much straight north of Little Current. We went there for the first time last year, and it was one of those places that I went, why haven't we been here before? It's not big. It's completely protected from winds from the western side and pretty much from, north, northwest, west, southwest. It's a little bit exposed to the east, but there's other islands that tend to block the winds from getting too big. The entrance is very straightforward. It's popular with the locals. You'll see smaller boats coming in filled with families, and they will frequently come in, drop anchor, tie to shore, and spend the afternoon there swimming, because the water is, it's all sand, it's warm, it's just a fabulous place. Here's a view from the beach looking out onto the boats that were anchored there last summer. Boats with shallower draft can get in much closer than the boats in this picture, and there were a number that were. They just weren't in my picture. Most of those will also drop anchor and tie to shore. As one of the individuals that I met when we were sailing there, she refers to Louisa as a mini version of the Benjamins. It's got the big granite rocks on one side. In fact, there's a fire pit on top of those. And then it's got the lovely beach access, and there's a fire pit there too. So it's just a very comfortable, beautiful place. As you head further east, you get into an area called the Bay of Islands. And this is another area that we went into for the first time last year. It takes a little bit of a commitment to get in there because it's further west and a little bit off the beaten path. But if you want to avoid the crowds, this would be an area that I would recommend that you head into. It's got a bit of a tricky entrance, right in the area where it's going between the small islands. You probably want to have a bow watch. You're going very close to some very shallow areas, but if you're paying attention, you won't have any problem getting through there. And when you get around that, it's pretty much wide open. This is a picture of a few boats from the hill above Jumbo Bay. And it's just a lovely place to anchor and spend some time. It is one of the places that if you have to do some work while you're in the North Channel, you won't see any cottages from this little bay, but you will see off in the distance a cell tower. And so if you need good connectivity, you can sit on the back of your boat and have really good internet access without seeing any other people other than the other boats that you're sharing the anchorage with. Moving east of Little Current, I'm not going to talk about Little Current other than to bring up a key point about Little Current. It's, well, a couple. It's the primary location of the North Channel. It's kind of the hub. However, there is nothing small about the current in Little Current. It's nasty, and it goes both directions. So and sometimes the wind can be going one direction, but the current's going the other direction. So you really need to watch the buoys as you're going through Little Current, through the channel area, to determine which way the current is flowing. We usually have a small herb garden on the boat, so I usually take a piece of parsley and drop it overboard and see which way it scoots off. That's my method of determining which way the current is going. But pretty much everybody I know has either had a docking disaster on arrival in Little Current or departing from Little Current, and our boat is one of them. Right after it got its brand new all grip paint job, Little Current put a nice gouge in the side. So if you don't want to deal with Little Current, you can anchor on the south side of Picnic Island or on the north side of Goat Island and take your dinghy into Little Current. It's a bit of a dinghy ride, but you can still do that. If you're in a smaller boat, you can anchor in Spider Bay Marina. And oh, by the way, the best laundry in Little Current is at Spider Bay Marina. The other area that I'm not going to mention is Haywood. It's a very popular place, but personally, I think the popularity of Haywood is due to the fact that it's a halfway point between Little Current and other cruising grounds to the east. So a lot of people stop there on their way in or out of Little Current as a halfway point. The next area is the McGregor Bay area. It's huge. It's It takes a bit of a challenge getting into it, but once you're back there, you can get lost for weeks, or as long as you have food or don't need a pump out. It's one of our favorite places. We literally dropped anchor last summer in one bay and stayed there for a week and never moved. It's just gorgeous. There are, it's basically a big conglomeration of islands. So there are a lot of cottages on the islands, but there's also an equal number of places that you can tour and cruise around where you're not in any sight of any cabins whatsoever. As I mentioned, getting into the McGregor Bay is a little bit of a challenge. Like, this is an example where those are all shoals, and most of them are underwater, so you can't really see them. So you have to take this. I mean, if you're looking at your chart, you can clearly see where the jog is. But you have to go east, and then you have to go north, and then you have to go northeast, and that gets you back just, into part of the area that you would want to go into. In the slide down at the bottom right, there's 2 anchorages shown there, but there's actually about 20 different anchorages in that area alone. Where the bottom anchor mark is, that's an area that's called the Usual Reason by the Great Lakes Cruising Club. I don't know why it's named that. It's lovely. There's a really good hiking trail not far from there. And around the corner, actually off the image, is another one that's called Papa's Cove. And you can anchor back in there, and there's a huge amount of kayaking that you can do, or take your dinghy and go exploring in that area. But you can also head north, and the picture on the left is the channel that you would take north. So you're going behind these solid granite walls or slopes for a good portion of it, but you're in 60, 80 feet of water. So you don't have to worry about running into anything unless you turn into the wall. And once you pass what some people call the Hobbit cabin, once you pass that in that channel, you're not going to see another cottage. Everywhere there's a finger that jets off, either to the east or the west, every one of those are places that you can anchor. The one that's on the top right, I've seen 10 boats in there, and each one of them had at least 2 football fields between them. It's a very, very large area. So if you want distance between you and your neighbors, it's a beautiful place. We usually go the other way, to the west, but it's a beautiful, beautiful area. The entire area is really good for kayaking or taking your dinghy around to explore. This is one of the areas that I went in with a friend, and we were going through this little slot that was maybe 10 feet wide. There's no way a big boat could go through there. So the only way you're going to see that is with a kayak or with a dinghy. And that's the picture of our boat in the anchorage where we stayed put for a week and didn't move. I mean, why would you want to move from that? It's gorgeous. And then the bottom picture, the other thing to note about this particular area, or all of the McGregor area, the fishing is very good. And they might show you the fish, but they're not going to tell you where they got it. So that's my husband in the red and a friend of ours that we buddy boat with periodically. And that was just one of the fish they caught that day. They tossed most of them back. The next area that is extremely well known, it's probably the best known next to the Benjamins, is Bayfin or Bayfine. Actually, the proper pronunciation is Bayfin. And you want to, as you're heading into the Bayfin area, there's some things to note. The initial entrance into Bayfin is it's a no-wake zone. So around that first red buoy, you're going to want to go slow until you exit the no-wake zone. And then you're going to want to make sure you stay in the channel. And it's going to be a little weird. It is red right returning. So you're going to want to leave the red buoys on your starboard, the green buoys on your port. So you're actually going to want to go around that first red one, and then you're going to wiggle back across to the other shoreline. And in one case where the circle is, that's a green buoy. you're going to go between the green buoy and the cliff. And don't go outside of that. Every year, there's somebody that thinks, because it's really wide open looking, it looks like there's a ton of space. And every year, a couple boats decide to, take a shortcut, and they end up with some very, very expensive repair jobs on their boats. This is the equivalent of the red buoy marker across from the orange. You are going to be going very, very close to the cliff, but you'll be in 30, 40 feet of water. So, and every other year, somebody goes out, adds a little more red spray paint to the rock. So just to make sure everybody's clear, that is the red buoy. If you go all the way back to the end of Bayfin, you're going to get into the area called the pool. And this is what everybody's heard about when it comes to Bayfin. There is a little bit of a jog that you have to take. Going in there, I would recommend that you have a bow watch and you take it slow just in case another boat is coming the other way. But once you clear through that, just stay in the middle all the way back, and you'll get into the area where the big circle is. It's a large area. It's very well protected from winds of all direction. This is a view from looking down from above of what the pool looks like. It's beautiful. However, by midsummer, it's also very weedy. So you want to make sure you have a really good set on your anchor with the weeds, and then you want to allow an extra 5-10 minutes when you're going to depart, because it's going to take you that long to cut the weed ball off of your anchor. Might want to take a knife up there with you. The thing that the pool is known for is its fabulous hiking. There are several trails that go off of one corner. This is the view up of Topaz Lake that's above the pool. It's maybe a 30-minute hike. It's absolutely beautiful. Bring your swimsuit. I'm not going to guarantee how warm the water is, but it's absolutely gorgeous. Heading down that same landing spot where you can leave your dinghy, you head the other direction, and it'll take you to the Artist Lake and some other hiking trails. So the pool has a lot of advantages in that there's not just time and things you can do on your boat, but there's also some good things that you can do getting off and getting your legs moving around that area. And it's an extremely popular area, but it is, and for many people, it is their favorite spot in the North Channel. Our favorite spot in Bayfin is actually Marianne Cove. And when we first started going to the North Channel, it wasn't as popular. So it was, wasn't really a huge issue of running into a lot of people. It's gained in popularity in the last, 5 years. It is completely protected from all winds. It is a deep anchorage in the center. This is one of those places where I would recommend that you drop anchor and you take a line to shore and either tie around a tree or tie to a boulder. Just a note, if you're worried about, and you should be, about damaging a tree because you're putting a rope around it, if you can get your hands on a 3-foot hunk of old fire hose from a fire department and slip that over your line, over your rope, it will protect the tree completely. It will also protect the rope if you put it around a boulder so it doesn't shake. So fire hose works really well. I got that tip from a former fireman. Anyways, this is both these boats, both of them have anchors off their bow and they've snugged in close to shore. The power boat is a little further out because he's right next to a shoal, but he doesn't have to worry about it because he's secure on both ends. This is our former boat, and it doesn't look like it, but we're actually about 10 feet away from the boulders. We try to get all the way back. Marianne Cove is also a place that you'll see boats raft together. So hopefully they're dropping more than one anchor, but I can guarantee you in most cases they probably aren't. But they will have one boat drop an anchor, and then other boats will come on the either side with fenders tie up to them, and then generally all of them take lines to shore. The best thing about Marianne Cove, as far as I'm concerned, is that it's extremely close to the start of the hiking trail that takes you to the top of Casson Peak. And this is the view that you get from the top of Casson Peak. It's fabulous. It's about a 60-minute hike up. 60 minutes, depends on how many times you stop because you're out of breath. Make that an hour and a half for me. Couple of tips about the hike up there. Bug spray, water, hiking sticks. If you have them, all of those will help. It's not recommended to take the hike if it's been raining recently. Most of the path follows the where the water flows as it's coming down. So if it's rained recently, it can get quite slippery. There's also some big granite slabs that you have to cross over as you work your way up, and they get exceedingly slippery when they're wet. So, but if it hasn't rained for 3 or 4 days, it's fine. You also want to bring, and actually this applies to any time you're going to shore, to do some hiking in the great area in the North Channel. Have a couple of baggies in your pocket because you never know when you're going to run across a stash of blueberries. And it works much better to put them in a baggie than in your hat. I experience on that. If any of you are geocachers, there's a geocache at the top of Casson Peak. Just side note. The next area south of Bayfield is Fraser Bay. We had not been in Fraser Bay for years until this past summer, and we'd sort of forgotten why and questioned why we hadn't been in there. It's got a large number, I shouldn't say it's got a large number of anchorages. It's got a couple. The island at the bottom is called Blueberry Island, and you can anchor anywhere in that cove. Or you can go around the backside and anchor anywhere there. We anchored in Blueberry down in that corner, and we could see across into the other anchorage on the island in the center. The island in the center had like 8 to 10 boats in it, and we decided it was too crowded for one more because it's really not that big. But we had perfect view into that anchorage. So the next morning, we heard the weather report. Some weather was coming in. Every boat left. So we scooted across and took our chances with the weather. And it's a lovely place. That particular island by the Great Lakes Cruising Club is called Gourd Blake Island, but nobody else calls it that. Everybody else either calls it Horseshoe or Half Moon. There is a little notch on part of that horseshoe, and the whole time we were there, except for when the storm was coming in, or really came in, these 2 trawlers owned this little cove. It's big enough for 2 boats if they drop anchor and tie to shore, and they're completely protected. That's our boat on the right. That's where we decided to park for when the winds came in. And then a couple other sailboats decided to join us, but the 3 boats rode it out and had no problem whatsoever. It had very, very good holding. The next one is Snug Harbor. Snug Harbor used to be more popular, I think, in years before the water levels went up as high as it is. It's very deep in the middle, but it's completely protected from all winds. But right now, with the higher water levels, the center is about 35 to 40 feet deep, and a lot of people aren't comfortable anchoring in that kind of deep water. There is one area that's kind of over by the 9 on the chart where the water level is really around 10 to 12, 14 feet, but it's a small area. This is another place where you could drop anchor in the middle in the deeper water and then tie to shore, because the drop off is fairly close to shore, which is one of the problems with Snug. but if you get so lucky as to land on that shallower area, we went in there expecting to see, at least 5 or 6 boats. We were the only boat. We stayed there for a couple days. There is a lovely hiking trail that takes you across over to Fraser Bay and a fossil beach on the other side. So another lovely place. Just be aware that it's a very deep anchorage. Covered Portage is another one of the famous, very popular places. There's 2 anchorages areas in Covered Portage. One is the outside area. The other is the inside. To go into the inside, you have to go around that spit and then avoid a shoal. It's really not that hard to do. It's one, if you've never been in there before, I would have a bow watch. But once you get into the inside, the depths range from 7 to 20 feet. So you can anchor kind of anywhere, and it's big, so it can hold a lot of boats. Up in the upper corner is where the trail is that takes you up to the top, and you'll see one of those. That's a view of the top of the hit cliffs in Covered Portage. So it also happens to be another one of those places that if you have to do some work, there's a cell phone tower straight out that channel. So you have really good internet access while you're sitting in this beautiful location. There's also another hiking trail at the opposite side that takes you over to Fraser Bay. So if you want some opportunities to get off your boat and get some exercise besides swimming, it's got a couple of really nice hiking trails. Okay, I thought I would, kind of finalize with some top 5 sort of things. Some of these are a collaboration between David Spencer, my husband, and myself, as far as which ones were which. So we kind of arm wrestled a little bit. But for the top most popular, the pool in Bayfin, Fox Harbor, Covered Portage, the Benjamins, and Haywood. But Haywood's only on there not because it's beautiful, but because it's a convenient stopping point. It is actually a very nice anchorage, but it just doesn't have the boulders and the magnificent views of the other places. 5 most scenic, you'll note that there's some overlap here. The pool, Covered Portage, the Benjamins, Bear Drop, and any part of McGregor Bay. And just for giggles and grins, I threw in places that are the hardest to anchor. Snug Harbor because of its depth, the Benjamins because of the poor holding in the main bay, the pool because of the weeds, Bear Drop, again because of that sneaky little shoal that people get caught up on, or don't get caught on more specifically. And then Moyles Harbor, which I did not cover. Moyles is still got a lot of deadfall from logging days. So there's a lot of down trees on the bottom and vertical stumps, but it's also very clear. So you can see where they are. You just have to pick the appropriate place to drop your anchor. 5 hidden gems, and this was a collaboration between David and myself on which were the hidden gems. We have a bit of a debate. Armour Island, which is next to Eagle Island, Battery Bluff in Bayfield Sound, Jumbo Bay, The Usual Reason in McGregor, and Snug Harbor. And that's a picture of David's boat. So again, keep an eye out for that boat. Go say hi if you see him. And then our personal top 6, Turnbull, Bear Drop Harbor, McGregor Bay, Covered Portage, Marianne Cove, and Fox Harbor. Okay, one thing before I start taking questions, if there are any, but if you're interested in joining the GLCC, there is the $25 discount on the initiation fee. So I think there's a table over in the other building. You can pick up the form. But if you're truly interested in cruising any of the Great Lakes, the GLCC has the best information on the hidey holes. All right, questions? Yes.
Is most of the land privately owned or eventually owned? Can you make campfires on some beaches?
You're it's a mixture of both. I kind of use the rule of thumb. If I'm able to go ashore and I see signs of a campfire, it's usually a pretty good indication that it's acceptable. Finding deadfall, I'm not sure what they're doing above us. But yeah, there's some of the land is Queensland, but I think the bigger issue in the North Channel is there are some islands that are private. There are some islands that are First Nation. And it's probably more that there's First Nation land that's the issue versus Queensland. But again, I would just, do an excursion. Most of the places that I mentioned where there are fire pits or whatnot, or there's places that you can see that somebody obviously has had a fire. Anyone else?
Are there any towns with marinas where you look out at the marina and go in down?
Oh yeah, yes, definitely. Sorry. Yeah, because those are common. Actually, any of the locations that I said for provisioning, those are also places that have restaurants. In fact, there is, if you go into Spanish, the North Channel Pizza Company has fabulous pizza, and they will also deliver to your boat in the marina. Killarney has some very good restaurants at the Killarney Bay Lodge and the Sportsman. It's also the home of Herbert's, which is famous for its fish and chips. Herbert's used to have a double-decker bus that they served the fish and chips out of, but well, if you talk to anybody who worked in it, it was miserable working conditions because it was hot, it was cramped. So now they have this nice, lovely building, and they have air conditioning. So the staff is much happier, but the red bus was kind of a treat. The fish and chips there is fabulous. They bring it in daily. They also sell fresh fish. If the boats have come in recently and they haven't used it all, selling it for the fish and chips. Yes.
What's the required speaker?
Oh, the question is about what are the current requirements. That's a moving target. In the last prior to COVID, it used to be that you would simply check in with the CBSA, or if you were a Nexus card holder, you would simply phone in. With COVID, they started using an app called ArriveCan. However, I know for a fact that they have updated the ArriveCan app as the requirements have changed. So initially it was you had to quarantine, so it checked in on you every day. They dropped that. Now there's a way that you can put your vaccination information into it. That's a moving target. All I know right now is that there is no reason that I would expect that the Canadian border would be closed this summer unless another huge wave comes through. So I'm expecting that it will be open, but this is March. Ask me on June 1 what the requirements are going to be, because it literally changes every other week. I was in Washington. My sister was in Vancouver in British Columbia. The whole time I was in Washington, which was 2.5 months, I was trying to figure out a way that I could go visit her. I never could because the rules were changing every other week. Any other questions? Are you all going to the North Channel next summer?
All the insects.
How are they here? I would say the same. No. I don't think I've ever encountered a no-see-em in the North Channel. Black flies I've only encountered on longer passageways getting to the North Channel. Usually on days where the wind is blowing from the southeast. And if it's light, they seem to find you in the middle of the lake. I haven't figured out how they do that when you're 100 miles offshore. Mosquitoes, it's like, this is the Midwest. So if it's rained recently, you're going to have mosquitoes. And if it hasn't rained for 2 weeks, they're probably not going to be bad. Generally, if you're in an anchorage, there's usually enough of a breeze that keeps them away from you. And especially if you're out on your boat, they usually don't really bother you. Yes.
But is there like is low current the main place that like best gets share?
No, I would not say the primary places that I'm aware of that people clear customs into Canada is either Meldrum Bay or Blind River. If you're coming from, say, from Lake Michigan, those would be the two areas. Little Current is a long ways in. If you're coming from the other side, if you're coming up Lake Huron, then Sarnia, down at the southern end of Lake Huron would be. But I think they're probably, just like now, if you're crossing into the U.S., you have to use the row map. I suspect that they're going to continue using the ArriveCan app and just adapt it as the regulations change. So it may be that, everything will be done through the app on your phone. Okay. Yes.
Time to tell. You mentioned the high season is like July to August.
Okay, the question about high season and whatnot. Yes, peak season in the North Channel starts mid-July, goes to mid-August. That's when it's most crowded. Keeping in mind that the first weekend in August is a Canadian holiday, so people are going to pad their vacations around that. My preferred time is the last 2 weeks of August and into middle September. But you also, if you're going that late in the season, you've got to plan. You've got to probably put in a couple extra weather days. Actually, if you're planning a cruise of that type, you should have 2 or 3 weather days put in just for good measure. Any other questions? Okay, thank you, everyone. Thank you for participating.